Does the SSPX reject the Catholic Church's magisterium? Stick around to find out.
You're watching Reason and Theology Live, a show dedicated to charitable discussions, debates, interviews, commentary, and analysis. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Reason and Theology. Your host, Michael Lofton, on a Thursday morning here. I'm asking the question, does the SSPX reject the Catholic Church's magisterium? This comes up because there is an official publication by the Society of St. Pius X that indicates yes, and so we are going to review it. Now, I understand that not everybody who adheres to the tenets of the SSPX may adhere to all of its tenets. I understand there could be a variety. There could be some people that adhere to some aspects and reject others. So I realize not everybody is cut from the same cloth and has the exact same views. There's some people who attend the SSPX who might have different views. There might even be some SSPX priests who have some different views. I recognize that, but all I can really do is engage not private opinions. I can only engage official publications and official sources from the Society of St. Pius X. So this is coming from Cor Jesu, Volume 4, January through February edition from 2018. This is a magazine put out by Society of St. Pius X. So again, this is going to be something more official as opposed to somebody's private interpretation. And that's really all I can engage. I understand there's different people with different views, and that's fine. Not saying that everybody has the same perspective, but I think it's fair to critique public information that represents officially the society and that actually quotes the words of their founder to back up this position. So it's not as if this is something that deviated from their founder's position. This is actually something that's rooted in it, which is why I always say, if you have something in the root, that is Lefebvre, it's going to find its way to the branches. That is the society today. Okay, let me share my screen and let's consider what they have to say. All right, so again, this is from Cor Jesu, Volume 4, January through February 2018. You can see it here on SSPX.Asia, English, and you come over here, click at the bottom, Cor Jesu, January PDF, and you'll have this thing pop up right here. And this one is on the profession of faith. So this is really important. We're talking about the profession of faith promulgated by John Paul II in 1989, the profession of faith that is currently still in use by the Catholic Church. If you want to be in accordance with what the church teaches, you have to profess the faith of the Catholic Church. And our faith is expressed in this 1989 profession of faith promulgated by John Paul II. Very helpful profession of faith in my estimation. But often overlooked. Okay, so here's what it says. The 1989 profession of faith. The post-conciliar church still retains a profession of faith. However, it is a new profession of faith, composed in the light of Vatican II and published on January 9th, 1989, by the then Cardinal Ratzinger, prefect for the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith. It is very short and basically consists of only the Nicene Creed, along with three brief or very brief paragraphs indicating the acceptation of what is taught by the Church's magisterium. There is no mention of any of the condemned errors of Protestantism or modernism contained in the two traditional professions of faith mentioned above. And they go over one from, I think it was from Trent, and another one from Pius X. So they talked about those previously, and they're now then comparing it to the 1989 profession of faith. And they're saying there's no mention of any condemned errors of Protestantism or of modernism. Well, the reason why is, let me actually pull up the profession of faith and I'll show it to you, and you'll see exactly why. And you will then see a problem with their criticism. Because they say, consequently, it's open to grave ambiguity and can be interpreted in any way that a person wills. So, I mean, it's a pretty big claim. The profession of faith is gravely ambiguous, and it's just a wax nose. You can interpret this thing any way you wish. It's a pretty major accusation against the Catholic Church. I'm going to show it's false. So here it is. I, so-and-so, profess with firm faith, believe and profess each and everything that is contained in the symbol of faith. Namely, I believe in one God. That's the Nicene Creed. Okay, and then with firm faith, I also believe everything contained in the Word of God, whether written or handed down in tradition, which the Church, either by a solemn judgment or by the ordinary and universal magisterium, sets forth to be believed as divinely revealed. Those are dogmas. So the person is saying, I affirm all of the dogmas of the Catholic Church. Can you imagine if the profession of faith sat here and listed every single dogma? We'd be here for days. So instead of listing every single dogma, defined and undefined, it says blanket statement, I affirm all of the dogmas of the Catholic Church. Guess what? That's going to include the dogmas that rejects Protestantism and modernism. So you can't just define this or read it any way you wish. It's already established that we have dogmas at Trent in Vatican I. You already have those dogmas that are targeting the Protestant reformers at Trent. And very technically, Vatican I's dogmas that address modernism, technically, modernism had not really become a thing yet. But I would say there are some canons and dogmas at Vatican I that apply to the modernists. It was pretty prescient. They saw what was coming on, the horizon. They saw that modernism was coming about. So they condemned those who would try to treat dogma as a wax nose and redefine the propositions of dogma. And they say, no, you have to maintain the same meaning. You can't redefine the meaning of a dogma. So there is no possible way that you could just say, oh, it could be interpreted any way that a person wills. It's open to grave ambiguity. That's slander against the Catholic Church. It is false. There is no way you can say, I profess all of the dogmas of the Catholic Church and still say, oh, well, I accept modernism. I accept the Protestant errors that were condemned at Trent. There's no way you could say those two things. So it's not ambiguous. This is absurd. It then goes on to say, I firmly accept and hold each and everything definitively proposed by the Church regarding teaching on faith and morals. These are secondary objects of infallibility. So I accept all of the secondary objects of infallibility that the Catholic Church teaches. All of them. Every secondary object, I accept them. These are things that are not explicitly or implicitly in divine revelation, but they are necessary to maintain by logical necessity or historical necessity to maintain something that is in divine revelation. So they're intimately connected to something that is part of what God has revealed, that is dogmatic. So you have to accept those two, all of them. You don't get to pick and choose. Everything. I firmly hold, accept each and everything definitively proposed by the Church. That would include canonizations of saints, by the way. All right. Third paragraph, which they don't like, and we're going to see that here in a moment, but let's just go ahead and read it so you have a little bit of background. Moreover, I adhere with religious submission of intellect and will to the teachings which either the Roman Pontiff or the College of Bishops enunciate when they exercise their authentic magisterium, even if they do not intend to proclaim these teachings by a definitive act. The majority of the teachings of Vatican II fall in this category. So you know they're not going to like that. This is the main reason why they're rejecting the profession of faith, because they're being told you have to assent to the authentic magisterium of the church, and that's going to include the teachings of Vatican II. They don't like that. They don't want to accept Vatican II. They're going to accuse it of heresy and error and modernism and all kinds of things, as we're going to see here in a moment. So, of course, they're going to say, I don't like this profession of faith. But, I mean, how Catholic is it to say, I reject the profession of faith of the church? I might accept this part and I might accept that part, but I don't accept this part of the profession of faith. Since when has that been a Catholic way to approach the profession of faith of the church? It's the whole thing. You accept the entire profession of faith or you're not Catholic. It's as simple as that. That's the way it's always been. Anytime we put forward a profession of faith for a heretic who wants to become a Catholic, or from a schismatic who wants to become Catholic, for somebody who's not Catholic, they want to come into the communion of the church, the Waldensians, for example, we put forward a profession of faith and they have to accept the entire thing. We did this at Florence as well. You accept the entire thing. You don't get to pick and choose what you like about the profession of faith, and you could reject other parts of the profession of faith. It is not traditional. It is not Catholic to pick and choose what you want from the profession of faith by the magisterium that has been promulgated by the magisterium. You're not Catholic when you do that. So if there's anybody who is adhering to the Society of St. Pius X, just keep this in mind. Do you also adhere to this? Do you also reject part of the profession of faith? If so, then you're not actually fully Catholic. All right. Consequently, it's open to grave ambiguity and can be interpreted in any way that a person wills. Well, we saw that that's completely false and slanderous against the church. That's impious. That should be censored. Worst of all, however, is the final paragraph of this profession of faith. And by the way, when I say censored, I'm talking about the theological censors that theologians and councils would issue against false propositions. That should be censored. Worst of all, however, is the final paragraph of this profession of faith. It's talking about this thing here, right? The third paragraph, authentic teachings of the church. The final paragraph of this profession of faith, which is nothing but a Pandora's box open to the errors of modernism. Absurd, absurd, absurd. First of all, what do you mean by modernism? That's a waxed nose in the way people define it. Basically, the way people tend to define it today is any doctrine I don't like, you're a modernist. That's modernism. Well, classical modernism, its main tenet would be to say, well, I accept the dogmas of the church, but I just completely redefine what they mean. So I accept that Jesus rose from the dead, but by saying he rose from the dead, you just mean like he rose from the dead in my heart, not bodily or something like that. You know, you just completely redefine the meaning. So you're saying you accept the dogma, but you just completely redefine what it means. That's condemned by Vatican I, and that's condemned solemnly. And so that's going to fall within these. So whenever you profess those two, you're affirming that modernism is condemned. You can't say that, oh, it's open to grave ambiguity. It lets in the errors of modernism. Nonsense. And again, notice the implication is that the church's authentic magisterium is full of the errors of modernism. That's the implication, because they're targeting the third paragraph here. So if you're going to target the third paragraph and say, well, if you accept this, you have to accept all the errors of modernism, what are you saying? You're saying the authentic magisterium is full of the errors of modernism. Since when has this been Catholic? To say that the church's authentic magisterium is full of heresy? Because modernism is a heresy. Since when has that been Catholic? So what my concern is this: the Society of St. Pius X presents itself as traditional, but this is anything but traditional. It seems traditional on the surface of things, but then when you start to dig a little deeper, you realize, this sounds very Protestant. And it's ironic that we're condemning Protestantism, but this is the Protestant method. All right. For it attempts to oblige a person to accept everything that collegiality, a novel era of Vatican II, imposes. Vatican II did not teach collegiality. They don't define their term here, but I mean, they do try to define it elsewhere. Collegiality in their literature tends to mean this notion that the College of Bishops are equal to the Pope, and can act even separately from the Pope. I mean, there's just different ways we could define it here, but equal to the Pope, independent from the Pope. The era of conciliarism, that's often the way it's depicted. Again, you can see different definitions from people in the society. So I realize you'll get a variety there, but it taught nothing of the sort. It did not teach conciliarism or a false understanding of collegiality. Lumen Gentium is very careful to note the proper understanding of the College of Bishops. The College of Bishops is never independent of the Pope. In fact, it actually isn't the College of Bishops if the bishops are acting independent of the Pope. They're only the College of Bishops when they're in union with the Pope and acting with the Pope. Cum Petro et sub Petro, with Peter and under Peter. And it also has a note there on Lumen Gentium to make it very clear that we're not teaching conciliarism or this false notion of collegiality. There's this famous note that Lumen Gentium offers that the Pope added to Lumen Gentium to make it very clear. So you can't, in good conscience, in my estimation, accuse Vatican II of teaching collegiality. That's absurd, that is slanderous, that is false. And again, notice the implication here. They're accusing an ecumenical council of error. Since when has that been Catholic? Does that sound familiar to you? I seem to recall one Martin Luther who did the exact same thing. Councils have erred and have erred many times. They can err and have erred. Isn't that Martin Luther at the Diet of Worms right there? That's the Protestant error right here. Is that the church is teaching this grade of error. I've already had a discussion on, well, can the non-definitive or authentic magisterium teach something that is in error as far as a really low grade? Sure, but this isn't a really low grade. Collegiality and the way they're defining it is massively erroneous. It's effectively heretical. Can the church teach heresy in its authentic magisterium? No. So what do you mean by error? Do you mean heresy? Well, that's false. It cannot teach heresy in its authentic magisterium. So I'm not going to rehearse that whole thing. I offer plenty of distinctions here when it comes to the authentic magisterium and to what extent can it teach error and to what extent can it not. The extent that they're attributing to it is impossible. But maybe go and check out my magisterium playlist for more on that. So for it attempts to oblige a person to accept everything that collegiality, a novel era of Vatican II, imposes, even though it has not been defined and is not part of the deposit of faith. First of all, defined? It doesn't have to be solemnly defined. What do you mean by defined? Unless, are you maybe saying that ordinary and universal magisterium and their definitive teachings are considered defined? What do you mean by defined? Usually when we use that language, we're talking about solemn definitions. But we don't adhere to only solemn definitions of the church, as we see, either by a solemn judgment or the ordinary and universal magisterium. If you're going to say I only adhere to solemn definitions, well, there goes contraception. I mean, I guess you can contracept now in the SSPX. Of course, they're going to say no, but upon what basis? Has it ever been solemnly defined that you can't contracept? No, but it is taught by the ordinary and universal magisterium definitively. So what do we mean by defined here? That's ambiguous, right? The SSPX is being ambiguous here. They need to define what they mean by define. But that's not a good argument. And it's not part of the deposit of faith. Okay, but there are plenty of things that you are to firmly hold to that are not part of the deposit of faith. They're called secondary objects of infallibility. This is basic magisterium 101. It doesn't have to be part of the deposit of faith for you to have to give some kind of irrevocable assent to it. The assent that you give to secondary objects of infallibility is an irrevocable assent because the teaching of a secondary object of infallibility is infallible. It's not going to change. So my thing is, well, this is ambiguous. It sounds like you're denying secondary objects of infallibility. Is that the case? Well, they're being ambiguous, so I guess I can do the same thing that they're doing to Vatican II, allegedly, that's being ambiguous. If we can read it in the worst possible light, I guess I can do that with them, right? And does not concern faith and morals. That's odd, because everything in the third paragraph is about faith and morals. Third paragraph is only in reference to matters of faith and morals. The third paragraph is not in reference to matters of science or history as history. It's in reference to things of faith and morals. So that is just flat out seemingly false. Maybe they can offer some clarification on what they meant there. It is the attempt of authority to impose the revolution of Vatican II, more, evil suspicion, looking at Vatican II as just trying to impose a revolution. And come on, as if it were a question of faith, as if it were contained in divine revelation. So wait, you only have to maintain something if it's in divine revelation in a matter of faith? You deny secondary objects of infallibility? They're not matters of faith. Not now, they touch on issues related to faith and morals, but you don't give the assent of faith, or at least divine faith. You might call it ecclesiastical faith in some circles. That's fine. But what they're talking about is divine faith, because they're talking about divine revelation. So what they mean here by question of faith is divine faith. But there's plenty of things that you have to assent to that are not part of divine faith. Secondary objects of infallibility and third paragraph teachings, authentic magisterium. And this is preconciliar. This isn't a Vatican II thing. This notion is found in Pius XII. It's found in other figures prior to him, Pius IX. The concept of the authentic magisterium is not unique to Vatican II in the post-conciliar era. If you're going to be a traditional Catholic, you have to accept that. And you accept second paragraph, which is secondary objects of infallibility. The way they phrase this is, it's basically saying, unless it's a dogma, I don't have to accept it. What? That's, again, not true. That's not traditional. And again, since when do you get to pick and choose what part of the profession of faith you're going to adhere to? Since when has that been Catholic? It says, here is the text of the third paragraph, and then it quotes it for us. I have underlined the unacceptable passages. So the unacceptable passages to them is College of Bishops. Oh, that's unacceptable to them. College of Bishops? College of Bishops is part of the divine constitution of the church. If you don't have bishops, you don't have the Catholic Church. How is College of Bishops unacceptable? That makes no sense. Now, might people abuse what is meant by College of Bishops? Sure, but Vatican II didn't do that. Vatican II was clear what it meant by College of Bishops. The bishops united with the Pope. That's part of the essential constitution of the church. So there's nothing objectionable about the College of Bishops. Why underline that? Go ahead and underline the Roman Pontiff, because some people can abuse what is meant by the papal ministry too, right? So let's underline that too, since that can be abused. This is absurd. And again, this is an official publication. And then it goes on to say, it's underlining, even if they do not intend to proclaim these teachings by a definitive act, that's objectionable. It's, again, the authentic magisterium. That is preconciliar in concept. Saliveri, for example, talks all about the authentic magisterium. And again, it's there in the magisterium in the preconciliar era as well. So this is a magisterial concept. So there's no way that you can say, well, this is objectionable to assent to something that's non-definitive. Since when? The vast majority of teachings of papal encyclicals are non-definitive. They're authentic magisterium, according to Pius XII himself. That's not, the vast majority of the propositions in there are not definitive, but they're authentic, and you have to give them religious submission of intellect and will. If we're going to reduce everything to a definitive act, well, there goes all papal encyclicals, pre-conciliary and post. There they go, out the door. From the 1700s unto the present, they're out the door. The College of Bishops is given equal authority with the Pope. Not true. That is not the way Vatican II and Lumen Gentium defines the College of Bishops. This is a lie. This is a straw man. This is the novelty of collegiality, which Vatican II teaches. Again, they're attributing novelty and error to an ecumenical council. That should give you pause. And a person is supposed to adhere with faith to teachings that are not definitive. It never says to adhere with faith to non-definitive teachings. It never said that. It said with religious submission of intellect and will. This is Magisterium 101. This is a fundamental error. Faith, belief, right here, firm faith is first paragraph teachings, dogmas. It's very careful to note faith here. But then notice here, submission of intellect and will. It doesn't say faith for third paragraph teachings. It says submission of intellect and will. Again, Magisterium 101. How could we make such a major error like this? This is a huge blunder. And a person is supposed to adhere with faith to teachings that are not definitive, that are not defined as part of the Catholic faith. First of all, things that could be part of the Catholic faith that are not solemnly defined. Again, ordinary and universal magisterium, unless you're talking about the ordinary and universal, that's defining something. That's not true, though. That's a poor use of terms. That's to conflate definitive with defined. It's not the same thing. So, I mean, it's clear this is showing no competency whatsoever with either the profession of faith or how the magisterium works. This is flat out false. It does not say you have to have faith for things that are not definitive. It says submission of intellect and will, which is a preconciliar concept. That is not part of Vatican II only. And it goes on, that are not defined as part of the Catholic Church. I already showed the problem with that. And which are therefore subject to evolutionary change. What? Evolutionary change? Are they talking about magisterial reversals for third paragraph teachings? You could certainly have a magisterial reversal, no doubt. But you could never have something in the third paragraph that is just blatantly heretical, that is just contrary to the faith. So it seems like they have some misunderstandings on magisterial reversals. Okay, to accept this would be to accept whatever the bishops as a whole decide. You ever heard of an ecumenical council? I mean, you have to accept what the bishops as a whole decide. Bishops in union with the Pope. That's what an ecumenical council is, right? They're gathered together as far as the extraordinary magisterium, all the bishops together, at least in potential, right? Maybe not every single one of them is present, but the College of Bishops with the Pope are gathered together. Either the Pope's there present, or he has legates, or he at least ratifies it after the fact. So they're working with the Pope. And they decide for the whole what is to be maintained. That's within the scope of the College of Bishops. The College of Bishops is never apart from Peter. It's never apart from the Pope. It's with the Pope. So yeah, we do accept what the bishops as a whole decide. That's Catholicism 101. Since when do you get to reject the universal magisterium? How is that Catholic? That is Protestantism. I know this person doesn't realize it, the person who authored this in the publication, but then it's promulgated in an official publication by the SSPX. Whatever the bishops as a whole decide. Again, I thought it was part of the role of the College of Bishops as a universal organ of the magisterium to decide things for the whole. I thought that was Catholicism 101. I guess that's out the door. Regardless, of whether or not it is divinely revealed. Again, so the universal magisterium does not have within its scope of infallibility secondary objects of infallibility. Is that what is being suggested here? The church has defined itself as such that it is able to offer secondary objects of infallibility. It's able to definitively settle matters that are not part of divine revelation but are related to them. It would also be to accept such false philosophical principles as religious liberty, which the church has condemned. Well, here we go with the religious liberty issue, right? It could be understood in a false way, a true way. Vatican II was clear that the traditional teaching on religious liberty remains intact, so I don't think that's appropriate, which the church has condemned. Which church? A church that he's now accusing? Oh, well, no, I'm talking about the pre-conciliar church versus the post-conciliar. Oh, so you believe in a formal rupture of the church? So your church doesn't actually exist anymore, or it only exists in you? How does that work? Sounds like Protestantism to me. Which the church has condemned, or such damaging naturalism as ecumenism. Again, what do we mean by ecumenism? That could be abused. There could be a proper understanding of it, but which are authentically contained in Vatican II. This is why they don't like it. It's because they realize they have to assent to the teachings of Vatican II, and they have a problem with that. Although they cannot, of course, be defined. Nobody ever said that they were defined. The whole purpose of the authentic magisterium is that it's not a definition. If it were a definition, it would be one of these two, a primary or secondary object of infallibility. Nobody ever said it was defined. It seems to me that whoever wrote this doesn't actually know what they're talking about as far as the use of these words. Let me see who wrote this. I forget what the priest's name was, but again, I have to attribute this to the Society of St. Pius X as a whole because they promulgated it. Father Peter Scott. Well, Father Peter, I mean, with all due respect, I appreciate your ministry as a priest, although I think you're exercising it in the disobedience to the church. That being said, I still recognize that you're validly ordained, so I have some respect for you there, but I think you need to brush up on your understanding of the magisterium, because you're just confusing categories all over the place. You're confusing secondary objects with third paragraph teachings. You're just all over the place. You're not using the proper terms correctly. Here's what Archbishop Lefevre had to say about the profession of faith. So here, all right, this isn't just something unique today to the profession of faith, in reference to some people in the SSPX. This isn't just unique to today. They're appealing to their founder and his comments on the profession of faith. So here's what Lefebvre had to say just a few months after it appeared in his conference 1 year later. This is them quoting him. Firstly, there is the credo, which possesses no problems. The credo has remained intact. The credo, of course, is the I believe part. It's going to be the Nicene Creed. And so the first and second sections raise no difficulties either. They are well-known things from a theological point of view. It is the third section. He's talking about paragraphs, third paragraph. It is the third section, which is very bad. What it means is in practice, is lining up on what the bishops of the world today think. Not exactly. What it means is lining up what the bishops of the world have officially taught. Not exactly the same thing of what some of them think. Those aren't the same thing, because a bishop could be unfaithful to the magisterium, right? In his personal, as a private individual, a bishop may not assent to what the magisterium has taught, right? I mean, we've had heretical bishops before, bishops who maintain error. So, but that doesn't mean that somehow the magisterium has changed because you have some bishops who have the wrong view. What we're assent to is not what somebody thinks or a group of people think, but it's actually what has been taught by the church. So I don't know how he got away with that error. In the preamble, besides, it is clearly indicated that this third section has been added because of the spirit of the council, or it's because of people who were rejecting the authentic magisterium. I wonder who. It refers to the council and the so-called magisterium of today. You can't put the magisterium of today against the past. It's in continuity. If you have a rupture where the magisterium of today is no longer the magisterium of the past, Protestants were right or Orthodox were right. One of those two. That's the Protestant thesis, or at the very least, the Orthodox thesis. It refers to the council and the so-called magisterium of today, which of course is the magisterium of the followers of the council. Yeah, since when has it been a bad thing to follow a council? And since when is it okay to dissent from a council? To get rid of the error, they should have added, insofar as the magisterium is in full conformity with tradition. Who gets to decide that? Lefebvre? Private individuals? Is that what we're reduced to now? Private judgment? So now as a private individual, I get to judge the magisterium? That's Protestantism. That's what Martin Luther did. As it stands, this formula is dangerous. Actually, what's dangerous is what Lefebvre is saying. It demonstrates clearly the spirit of these people with whom it is impossible to come to an agreement. It just sounds like evil suspicion to me. It just sounds unreasonable to read the profession of faith that way. I think what happened is Lefebvre saw a lot of people who were abandoning the faith, and even saw bishops who were abandoning the faith, and he just got jaded, and he just had that impression that colored his view of everything at that point. So it's kind of understandable. I mean, I get it, but at the same time, I don't. It's not excusable. But I mean, I think he was just kind of shell-shocked. You know, he just saw so much corruption and problems that it just colored everything that he saw from there on out. But that's the wrong approach. Okay. He says, it is absolutely ridiculous and false, as certain people have done, to present this profession as a renewal of the anti-modernist oath suppressed in the wake of the council. But it is that, because of that right there. Modernism is still rejected if you affirm these things. You cannot, with firm faith, I believe everything contained in the Word of God, whether written or handed down, and I also firmly accept and hold each and everything definitively proposed by the church. You can't say those things and hold to modernism in good conscience. You can't. And what do they want us to do? Literally spell out every single heresy? We'd be here for days. So you want somebody to literally read out every single heresy and affirm every single dogma, like literally read out the dogma? We'd be here for days. That's absurd. It's all covered in this paragraph, and in this paragraph, and in that. It's all covered. All the poison in this third section, notice the language and rhetoric. Poison, ridiculous, dangerous. Quite the polemicist. All the poison in this third section, which seems to have been made. Think about that. He's saying that the church is promulgating something that's poisonous. Again, is this within the bounds of orthodoxy? The church is promulgating something that's poisonous. All the poison in this third paragraph section, which seems to have been made expressly in order to oblige those who have rallied to Rome to sign this profession of faith and state their full agreement with the bishops. It is as if in the times of Arianism, one had said, now you are in agreement with everything that all the Arian bishops think. He's literally comparing the magisterium of today to Arianism. Please don't tell me that the Society of St. Pius X, if you formally adhere to this stuff, that you're in good standing with the Catholic Church. You're not. You're not in full communion with the Catholic Church if you formally adhere to this stuff. There's some people who don't formally adhere to it. Okay. They may not be formal schismatics, and they may not be formally in dissent against the magisterium. But if you actually are adhering to this, you're not a Catholic. You have some imperfection in your communion with the Catholic Church. No, I am not exaggerating, he says. It is clearly expressed in the introduction. It is sheer trickery. So the church is trying to trick us. In these new texts, there is submission to the council and the conciliar bishops. Horrible thing to accept, or to require somebody to accept an ecumenical council in the universal magisterium. Terrible thing. Shame on the council and the church and the pope for requiring us to accept the council and the bishops. What? That is their spirit, and no one will change them. Again, how is this a person who is in good standing with the Catholic Church? And if you maintain this, how are you in good standing with the Catholic Church? Alas, such a profession of faith, to say the very least, defeats the purpose of a profession of faith. No, it doesn't. It's neither a clear declaration of what one believes nor what the church believes. It doesn't have to be. No profession of faith has literally listed out every single dogma of the Catholic Church. None of them. Even the ones that they mention, they don't mention every dogma in the Catholic Church. This is a straw man. It's all covered in those paragraphs. But we've never had a profession of faith that literally lists out every single error and dogma. Never. Because we'd be there forever. It leaves the door open to Protestantism? Absurd. You cannot accept these two paragraphs and be a Protestant. Tell me a Protestant that could ever affirm that right there. Have you ever seen a Protestant who says, with firm faith, I also believe everything contained in the Word of God, whether written or handed down in tradition, which the church, either by a solemn judgment or the universal magisterium, sets forth to be believed as divinely revealed? No Protestant can say that. You know why? Because they don't believe that there is an infallibility outside of Scripture. They believe there might be authorities outside of Scripture, but they're never infallible and they're never binding on your conscience. That's called sola scriptura. No Protestant in good conscience could affirm these things right here. No Protestant. So that's absurd. It does not leave the door open to Protestantism. That's evil suspicion. Because it doesn't list out literally every Protestant error, it doesn't have to. It's already contained in here. It leaves the door open to Protestantism, modernism, and ecumenism. It's the same. It's the repetition of the same talking points I've noticed by the Society of St. Pius X. Like, it's the same stuff. A broken record. It consequently neither gives the glory, which is due to God's truthfulness in revealing the faith to us, nor does it promote the salvation of souls by drawing them into the unity of the Catholic faith, outside which no one can be saved. This is odd for a group that, if you formally adhere to it, you're outside of communion with the Catholic Church, to talk about salvation only in the Catholic Church and unity of the Catholic Church. That's just odd to me. As for us, let us take advantage of every opportunity to profess our faith outwardly, whether it be by formulas provided by the church at the end of a retreat, or whether it be simply by assisting at the traditional mass and reciting our rosary in public, or going on pilgrimage, or whether it be by speaking openly of our true and absolute convictions of faith, the greatest certitude that a man can have. In this regard, we will do well to recall the words of St. Paul, his disciple: fight the good fight. Fight the good fight of faith, lay hold on eternal life, whereunto thou art called, and has confessed a good confession before many witnesses. Keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding the profane novelties of words and appositions of knowledge falsely so called. Surely it is St. Pius X, our patron saint, who now repeats these words from heaven. Yeah, I don't know if you should speak on behalf of Pius X. He might think a little differently than you would suggest. But do you see what's going on here? It's a rejection of the Catholic Church's magisterium is what it is. Under the guise of accepting the magisterium of the past, which it's not. Under the guise of tradition, which it's not. So the irony here is to present this as the traditional faith, the traditional position, when it's anything but that. And the very thing that they're accusing the church of is the thing it's guilty of. That is the error of Protestantism. This is dissent at its worst. And I hope that that makes you take a second look at the Society of St. Pius X and the way I've had to do. Because I know that there's some good people who, frequent SSPX chapels. There's even some really good SSPX priests who are good people. And that may color our impression of the SSPX objectively. It may make us think, well, it can't be that bad because so-and-so is a really good person. So-and-so can be a really good person, but they could also belong to Mormonism, right? So just because so-and-so is a good person or sincere doesn't mean the system itself is right. I've met some really nice Mormons, but I'm going to say Mormonism as a system is unacceptable. It's not what Christianity is. Now, I would say the Society of St. Pius X as a system is a whole lot closer to the truth than Mormonism. Mormonism is like way, 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 way out there. So there's obviously grades and degrees to which somebody could be closer to the truth. And in a lot of ways, the Society of St. Pius X is close to the truth. And that's why it's a little harder to see some of these problems on the surface. But then when you start to dig deeper, you look at this and you say, wow, this is not traditional. This is not, if you formally adhere to that, you're not in full communion with the Catholic Church. And they're going to say, well, I'm not in full communion with the post-conciliar church, but I'm in full communion with the Church of the Ages and Rome of the Ages and stuff like that and rhetoric like that. And I'm just thinking, well, Martin Luther can say the exact same thing. So that doesn't really do anything. Once you've forfeited the current magisterium, the magisterium of this day, once you've forfeited that, you've forfeited Catholicism. Eternal Rome, right? That's the rhetoric used. Okay, I hope this was helpful. Let me know what you thought about it there. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. If you had any questions, go ahead and ask them in the chat. I'll take them for just a few minutes. Make sure to put them to @Reason and Theology, and then I'm going to head out. If you don't put it to @Reason and Theology, I'm just going to think it's a comment. I'm probably going to skip over it. So yeah, I think there are rad-trads who don't know what Protestantism is and just think that it's relativism. There are many denominations, ergo anything goes, and that's relativism. Yeah, some people may have that impression, but like historical Protestantism with the magisterial reformers, what I'm hearing from Lefebvre and this profession of faith is not substantially different than what Luther would have argued for, at least at some part of his life. I mean, Luther was kind of all over the place and changed his views here and there. So great stuff, Michael. Thank you. I appreciate it. Very helpful. Catholic Crusader Deus Vult says, thank you. Were there any other questions? Let's see here. See a lot of comments, but looking for questions specifically. Okay, what is this by Shane? Hello, Michael. Could the SSPX be reading into theology in Vatican II an erroneous understanding because in part an apostasy narrative, which Kevin Simmons refutes? Thank you, Michael. What it is they're seeing some bishops who are misusing Vatican II, especially Lefebvre. He was seeing bishops misusing Vatican II, and that colored then his view of Vatican II. Lefebvre signed off on all of the documents of Vatican II, all of them. He later on in his life said he didn't sign off on one of the documents, but it's factually not true. And even the society admits it's factually not true. Maybe he forgot. I'm not going to assume that he was lying. I'm going to give him the judgment of charity and say he wasn't lying. He just maybe forgot, but he signed all the documents. But I think so objectively, the documents are fine. I think what happened is he saw people abuse Vatican II, and that colored the way he went back and reread Vatican II. And then he took the abuses and then read the documents in that way. And so he was then condemning Vatican II itself rather than the abuses. I'm fine with somebody standing up to abuses and refuting abuses. That's fine. But what it is whenever you start to attribute those abuses to the magisterium itself and then start rejecting the magisterium, that's when we have the problem. At that point, you're no different than the liberals who do the exact same thing because they are not in full agreement with the Catholic magisterium either. They also reject certain teachings of the Catholic Church. So at that point, upon what basis are you really going to criticize liberals when you're guilty of the same thing? But I think that's what happened. They saw a narrative, they saw a lack of faithfulness, they saw an abuse, and they overshot, they overreacted. The same thing with Luther. Luther was saying abuses with indulgences. It was right to address that, but he went too far. He overshot and ended up actually going against the church itself. So I think that's what happened is Lefebvre just overshot, overcalculated because he was reacting to problems that he was seeing with people. And I think we can stand with him and say, yeah, you're right to oppose some of these problems. Absolutely. I think we can be in agreement there. The point, however, is what you're offering as the solution, as the antidote, is itself a problem. You're adding to the problem. Mike Irish, are cities more logically consistent? On what point specifically? On some points, I might say yes. On some points, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. There is no pope, but the SSPX say there is, but are disobedient to him. I think that you could actually offer a better uh, argument for the Society of Saint Pius X than what I'm saying here. So I don't think it necessarily has to lead to the Sedevacantist thesis, but it does tend to lead to it. But it doesn't necessarily have to. My bigger problem with the society is not that it could lead to this Sedevacantism or something like that. That is a possibility. But for those who make enough distinctions, my bigger problem, however, is that it's still going against the magisterium, and it's not operating within the canonical bounds fully, at least the canonical bounds of the church. Again, fully. There can be some exceptions and some nuance to that, but I think we can recognize that as Benedict notes. So I have ultimately problems with it elsewhere, but yeah, I could say that it could lead you to Sedevacantism or Eastern Orthodoxy or something like that. But again, that's not going to be my main argument. That's going to be kind of a backup potential argument. McVine says, keep up the good work at Catholic Answers. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, Buck asks, is it helpful to criticize the SSPX when there are more urgent problems in the church today? I think that we need to criticize error where there is error. I think it's legitimate to do so. It's like asking me, it's like asking Athanasius, you're just this troublemaker. I mean, gosh, there's so many things going on in the Roman Empire today, and you want to fixate on this issue with Arianism, like it's literally just an iota, literally talking about one letter at a council, one letter in one word. I mean, why are you causing all this trouble in the empire? I mean, aren't there other things to deal with? Is that our argument, really? Yeah, I actually think that one letter is important because it completely changes the meaning of who Jesus is, which is then going to impact your soteriology. So yeah, we're going to fight on this one letter. And yeah, there might be other important issues to deal with, but this is also an important issue to deal with, and it's legitimate to fixate on it. And that's what I'm saying here. There aren't other more urgent problems in the church today. There are other urgent problems, sure, but when you say more urgent, you're now trying to say that something that it takes people away from full communion if they formally adhere to it. Takes people away from full communion is a less urgent problem. Well, like, I don't know if I'd put it in those terms. I would say we have a bunch of urgent problems and we're all trying to address it, but there's plenty of people out there already addressing other urgent problems. I'm not going to do literally everything and address every single problem out there. There's plenty of other people on YouTube who are addressing other problems. There's not a whole lot who are addressing this problem. So I'm filling in a gap here. I'm not trying to literally tackle the world. There's other people who are doing a great job at dealing with that. But I'm going to fill a gap whenever I see it. And I think it's legitimate to do so. Let's see here. I think the only reason why you would ask that question is if you don't realize the gravity of the situation, frankly. I think you don't realize the gravity, so I'm asking you respectfully to consider what I've said in this video, maybe go back and watch it, consider other things that I've said about the Society of St. Pius X. Consider that as well. I think when you see where I'm coming from, you're going to realize how much more urgent it is. Especially given that a lot of people are right now dissatisfied with Pope Francis and the Catholic Church, and they're going elsewhere. And they're starting to go into the Society of St. Pius X, and then starting to go, Sedevacantism or Eastern Orthodoxy in other directions. And I'm trying to address that problem. Let's see. If the Magisterium contradicted itself, Protestants or the Orthodox were right and the SSPX are still wrong. I would qualify that a little bit. But the kind of contradictions that they're talking about, that Lefebvre is talking about, yeah, I'd agree with you. The kind that he's referring to, yes. The kind that is dangerous, poisonous, yeah, absolutely. Going against the Magisterium is not retaining tradition, Roundtable says. I agree. That's why I say, again, there's this veneer of traditional Catholicism, at least what they would call traditional Catholicism. But then when you really dig deeper, I don't think it's there. But sometimes that's all that you really need, is just kind of that surface level veneer of traditional Catholicism. That's good enough to confuse a lot of people, because a lot of people aren't aware of the issues at a deeper level. They're just kind of at the surface level. So they look at the SSPX and they think that that's traditional Catholicism, and that's good enough to confuse the average person. Let's see. Jackdaw says the SSPX represents rebellion and mere lip service to rightful authority, this illusion of stability. Well, I certainly think that they have problems with the magisterium and authority. I think you're right to note that. Let's see. Grant says unemployed now, so I can finally enjoy RNT streams again. That's funny. Well, let's hope you get employment soon. And just check out RNT whenever you get a chance. What else we got here? Happy feast day, Michael. Mike Irish says, thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. Still looking. Okay, so here's a comment. That's why I'm confused. I'm the average person. The SSPX to me is tradition. Fair enough. I used to be there, so I totally get it. What I'm saying is just continue to look into the issues. Consider some of the content that I've offered here on this channel. Dom from the Logos Project and what John Salza is putting out there on the channel. Consider also that. I think when you continue to look into the issues, you'll see where we're coming from a little bit more. But fair enough. I've been there. Totally been there. But I've also learned a lot more since then that has changed the way I perceive the SSPX. And here I'm talking about the SSPX as a whole. I'm not talking about individuals. I still stand by the fact that there are good people, even good priests who are Society of St. Pius X priests. And I believe some of them can be saved. And so I don't think that like literally every single SSPX adherent is somehow damned. But I do think the more you actually adhere to this, the more you formally adhere to this, the more likely it is you're putting an impediment between you and God. Because you're starting to get in now to elements of being formally schismatic and dissenting formally from the magisterium of the church. That's never a good thing. Again, I can't judge any one particular individual and their soul. I can't do that. But what I can do is judge the system as a whole and just warn people from the dangers that you're going to encounter in this system. Okay, let's see what else we got. Do people confuse quality of liturgy, i.e. abuse and bad experience of Novus Ordo, and conflate it with the faithfulness to the magisterium? Okay, so you're asking me, like, do some people confuse liturgical abuses with the magisterium itself? Almost certainly. And can we say that the shepherds of the church need to do a better job at stamping out liturgical abuses? Yeah. But you don't want to conflate that with the magisterium itself. The magisterium is the teaching authority. Yes, some members who are part of that teaching authority might fail in their implementation of certain things and in stamping out problems in their diocese, but that does not equal magisterium itself, right? Magisterium is what is being taught. And we might speak of the magisterium as far as a subject, the organs of the magisterium and subjects. We We might use that term to refer to the Pope or a bishop or something like that. But recognize that the assent is to what they're teaching, not to how they behave, how effective they are. You don't have to assent to that. I can say that some leaders in the church are doing poorly there. I can say that charitably. But that doesn't mean that I'm rejecting their magisterium. It's not the same. Grant says, never really seen a liturgical abuse in my area of Wisconsin. Well, I feel like they're fairly pervasive in the United States. I feel like that. But maybe I have a distorted impression because I haven't been to every church in the United States. Okay, so I think I grabbed everything from the chat. We're right at an hour, so we'll go ahead and end it there. Thank y'all for watching. Like I said, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, share this with people that you know are struggling with this question on the SSPX. I think they need to see this, and they really need to consider it. All right, we will see y'all later. God bless. Oh, wait, before you go, I would really appreciate it if you would consider supporting this channel. This is my primary means to provide for my family, and it also helps me to produce content like this video. If you would like to support me, become a patron by visiting patreon.com/Reason and Theology. You'll also get access to extra exclusive content when you become a patron. Lastly, hit that like button and the subscribe button, and be sure to leave a comment down below. God bless.